Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazzo.
Hey friends, welcome. And hey, it's good to see you guys, friends, on Facebook and Rumble. We appreciate you guys joining us. And again, the Worldview Matters website is worldviewmatters.tv. Today, our guest, John Haller. We're going live. First time we've done this on Facebook and Rumble. John, welcome. Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you.
All right, never a shortage of things to talk about. I'm going to just let everybody in on a secret, behind-the-scenes secret. John said he wanted it to go 2 hours, and but we can only do an hour.
I don't know if you have that on recorded. I think I said I could go 2 hours.
You could go 2 hours. Well, actually, you've done 2 and 3 hour updates, haven't you?
I've done a couple 2 hours, yeah.
With other people?
No, well, I've done a couple hours on my own. It's really not hard for me.
Yeah. Well,
sometimes the Lord gives you the gift of gab, maybe. And when he gives you that, he also gives you the inability to know when to be quiet.
Yeah, well, sometimes, but anyway.
They kind of go hand in hand.
It's good information, but guys, I appreciate you watching. Share, okay, if you're watching, just share it if you're on Facebook. And we want to go to the first topic, John, and Lord, just lead us and guide us and help us to encourage the body of Christ and maybe draw in some people that want to get an idea of what the biblical worldview is all about. I've got an email, and this is breaking in my inbox just today. Couple hours ago, new Barna research at the Cultural Research Center. And John Haller, it says, contradictory American worldview mashups are a recipe for disaster. And I'm gonna cut right to the chase. It says, typical American adult adopts beliefs and behaviors from an average of 9 different worldviews, including Marxism, Eastern mysticism, and secular humanism. John, before we get to another quote from the research, your thoughts on where we are in that kind of devastating information?
Well, in 2 Timothy chapter 3, also over in 1 Timothy, we're told that in the last days perilous times will come. And it says people will be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers. I mean, it goes through a list that describes probably a lot of the different worldviews that Barna came up with in his survey. And people just sort of pick one from column A and some from column B, and they come up with a worldview. And there's not really a consistent worldview. Because I see this, and I think we'll talk about this in just a moment when we talk about an interview that Tucker Carlson did, which shows this mashup happening in real time. And so we know that this is going to be the way it's going to be in the end times. It's very hard to find someone with a consistent, coherent worldview today. I mean, look, I was a trial lawyer for 40 some years. I've tried cases in front of a jury, and I may have told you this before. If not, I'll say it again, because I think it's important. When I used to go to seminars, trial lawyer practice seminars, they would teach us how you go about being effective in presenting your case. That's what they were like, using charts and graphs and PowerPoint and slick looking slides and that sort of thing. But somewhere in the middle of my career, so I became a lawyer in 1980. So sometime around in the 90s to 2000, things changed, David. The seminars I went to switched from here is how you present things to here is how you appeal to people's emotions. And so there was a whole shift in the culture. I remember doing a seminar at a national church conference back in 2001. It was really about 6-7 weeks before 9/11. And I talked about what I saw, my research and looking at things and prophecy and that sort of thing, was that this postmodernism thing was going to sort of overtake the world. It was interesting.
Do you have that on tape?
I don't know if it's recorded someplace. I think I still have my PowerPoint someplace.
That's prophetic.
That I prepared, but the I had a couple of pastors push back on me. Oh, John, you don't understand. They said postmodernism will be a really good thing for the church because people are asking questions. But the problem is, we as conveyors of God's truth, we're supposed to be giving them answers to the questions,
yes,
not allowing them to wallow and feel great because they're asking questions.
Yeah.
So it's been a very problematic thing in the church. First Timothy and Second Timothy talk about it as an end time phenomenon. We have these things in our culture. So, for example, you will watch a church. I'll use an example of North Point Church with Andy Stanley. I think it's kind of low. It's kind of low hanging fruit,
yes.
I know, but
yeah.
But he had a conference recently where they were helping people deal with children who might be going through transgender questioning issues. And the whole orientation of the conference was, hey, this is what we need to do. We need to support them. We need to affirm them, because if we don't, they'll commit suicide. This is the great myth that's risen up around these things. And then later in the conference, Andy Stanley got up and said, but at North Point, while we allow homosexuals to do this and that type of thing, and I don't think he said that exactly, he said, we stand for traditional marriage. But then you go and look at the people who attended the conference, and they say, this was the most gay affirming conference I've ever been to, and gay marriage affirming conference I've ever been to, except for that thing that Andy Stanley said on Sunday. So there you have a very syncretistic worldview, like Barna's talking about in his survey, where people take a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B. We've seen this, and I've written on this years ago, and it cost me a lot of, I was asked to resign from a board of a seminary because I was questioning the orientation of the institution's spiritual formation program. Not that the term spiritual formation, if it means just discipleship, that's okay.
Yeah.
But what happens is people have brought everything in the world under the guise of spiritual formation, so that you have a very syncretistic worldview where people bring in outright rank Eastern mysticism practices into evangelical seminaries. And this is true in many evangelical seminaries. Some are holding the fort. Some have tried to claw their way back from falling where they've fallen. But it's a syncretistic worldview. Maybe I can give you a practical example. In 2015, Pope Francis went to Congress and gave a speech at Congress. Now, he's the head of the Roman Catholic Church. But look, when you look and unpack what he is, he's a radical leftist Marxist liberation theologian.
Yes.
And so he's brought all this Marxism nonsense into his Catholic faith. So when he gives the speech to our Congress, he says, here are 3 examples of people who you should follow. Number 1 was Martin Luther King. Now, there's things we can like about Martin Luther King, but he himself was very syncretistic in a lot of the ways that he approached things. The second person he said was Dorothy Day, who is one of the most radical American Marxist, Leninist, communists that we've ever had. She used to write a magazine called the Catholic Social Worker magazine. She lived up around Cleveland. She lived with a guy. She wasn't even a good Catholic. And I happen to know the niece of the guy that she lived with for a long time. And she was just a miserable, lousy human being. But here is the Pope praising this this lunatic.
Wow.
Then the third person that he said was Thomas Merton. Thomas Merton was a Catholic monk. To this day, I would call him the patron saint of Christian mysticism that has permeated itself through a lot of aspects of seminary spiritual formation programs, and New Age that's been brought into the church. And he was more, in fact, I have a video somewhere of the Dalai Lama saying, Merton came to us and this was very important. East, West meet together in one person. Very important, coming together.
Wow.
That's the Dalai Lama. And so Merton, and by the way, Merton died. He was on a trip to Tibet to meet his Buddhist brothers and spend time in their monasteries. And I think he was at a hotel in Thailand. He reached for a lamp and was electrocuted. Now, some people think he was killed intentionally. That's, you know how it is. Nobody dies a natural death these days, it seems. But he died, but he is to this day very popular. And when he died, David, his obituary was on the front page of the New York Times. A guy that a lot of Christians have never heard of, but the seminary people have. The seminary people pushing him through spiritual formation, Mindy Caligulari and the people up at the big church where Bill Hybels was in
Willow Creek.
Willow Creek.
Yep.
That Len Hybels, they were all pushing Thomas Merton and Thomas Keating, and maybe it's Robert Merton. I can never remember, but Thomas Keating and some of these things, and they're all pushing the same thing. And so then that sort of carries over into things like the Enneagram, this thing which comes out of the occult. In the New Age, Marcia Montenegro and Don Benoit wrote a great book on that, on the Enneagram. And by the way, one of the big proponents of the Enneagram is Andy Stanley. So, so there's like this circle of everybody sort of, well, we're evangelical, we're Christian, but they're on like that the tilt-a-whirl, where they're kind of going around the outside of the center of Christianity, and they're just kind of picking up stuff as they're rotating around the center of Christianity. So, and they just kind of throw it into the mix.
You just reinforced the new conclusions from Barna's research, and you explained it very well in what you just shared, because he said the typical American adult adopts beliefs and behaviors from an average of 9 distinct worldviews. And that's a hodgepodge of philosophies that contradict. And this is known as syncretism. So friends, if you just joined us on Facebook or Rumble Live, we're with John Haller talking about biblical worldview issues. And the new Barna research shows that syncretism represents 92% of American adults' dominant philosophy of life, and that's up from 88% just 3 years ago. So this is disturbing, John, but what you just said also reminds us of the level of biblical illiteracy in the church, because we don't know about mysticism, spiritual formation, Marxism, these other ideologies that have crept in. Isn't that from Jude, or, they have crept in among us?
Crept in unawares, that's right.
Yeah.
And so what happens is, so when I raised the issue, I was immediately labeled as divisive. John, you're divisive. And I'm like, so I asked the person that charged me with this, I said, by what standard am I divisive? And they said, well, Titus 1:9, reject a factious, divisive man after the first warning. But I said, you don't even know what the Bible says on that issue. And this was a favorite thing of James MacDonald before he had the big blow up in his life and career, the church, Harvest Chapel in the suburbs of Chicago. And he said, yeah, you're a divisive man if you don't, you're a divisive man if you don't agree with me. But the scriptural standard for divisiveness is someone who does not follow the truth of the scripture. That's the divisive man that you should mark. That's the divisive man that you should avoid, not the one who stands for what the Bible says.
Yes.
And so what did they do? They've inverted what that passage was even trying to take. And by the way, the word for divisiveness in Titus that's used there is the Greek word heretiko.
Ooh, heretic.
Now, that's exactly right. That's where we get our word heretic from. That's the Greek antecedent of the English word heretic. So you can see how it all kind of fits together.
Yeah. So, John, a couple other things from the study. This is very interesting. You've heard the expression, do what thou wilt, right? So what Barna says, one of the examples of significant held beliefs, quote, as long as you do no harm, do whatever you want. And that is a core tenet of Wicca and Satanism, as well as a principle embraced by secular humanism. And this idea is held by, ready friends, I hope you're sitting down, a projected 40 million American results. So it's no wonder we have so many problems with from the biblical worldview declining and a just lack of understanding of the Bible. John, your thoughts before we move on, quick.
Well, and in the Barna survey that we've talked about, he does say that there's a biblical worldview of 4%. And that's pretty consistent with this prior surveys of Barna. So he kind of years ago, he broke down the Christian faith into like 5 fundamentals. And what he found was that among evangelical Christians, it was like, I don't know, 4 or 8% that held all 5 of them. So this has been a problem. So I'm with my friends who believe in the rapture and that type of thing. But if you ever see the video, my friend Bill Salas uses this video, and the guy's up there preaching in a church service, and the rapture happens, and the Bibles fall to the ground. And then there's like a bunch of people standing around. It's funny if you look at that video closely. Everybody was in a suit and tie, got raptured. It's the guys who were there in t-shirts and shorts who've been left behind. I just thought it's just kind of an interesting. I don't know if there's a subtext there from the people who prepared that video, but I'm not sure that the rapture will be maybe the event that changes so much. It may be for example, if it happens at a church. I had a pastor tell me, I think the church will be full on Sunday. Because these people are going to figure out, hey, wait a minute, what did we miss? They're not gone. So the next Sunday they'll be there. And it may be that if people are there, it's like, hey, did Joe go to the bathroom? Is he? He's been like he's been in the bathroom for a while here during the service. And that may be how it happens. Unfortunately, I don't want it to happen that way. I'm just saying is when you look at these studies, that indicates that may be the way that it happens, unfortunately.
Okay, we're going to get to Israel. We're going to talk about an article over at the Jerusalem Post. Also, we'll talk about Christ and the checkpoint, the Biden administration, some of the moves they're making. Also, you said some fascinating things in an email, John. At most, 20 of the hostages that were taken by Hamas are still alive, and don't believe Hamas and their numbers. But we're also going to answer this question when we come back from our break. Question posted by Nancy. John and David, as a Bible-believing follower of Christ, how do I react to the Republican Party? I have been a conservative my whole life. My email and texts are getting blown up wanting donations. I'm very hesitant because the majority don't seem much different from the Democrats. How do you feel about what Americans should do or who to get behind? And also, I had hope that Speaker Johnson, who professes Christ, but yet maybe another traitor to the word. What are your thoughts and advice for us? We'll answer that question with John Haller in 30 seconds.
Introducing Patriot Mobile, the wireless carrier that stands with you. We are committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
Get free activation now with promo code DAVID. Friends, if you know someone that's interested in supporting Worldview Matters, you can please send an email. Our producer will return it right away. worldviewmatters@fpeusa.org. And again, our website, worldviewmatters.tv. So, John Haller, you heard that question. Let's get to that first, because we're going to get in the realm of politics, and which is very important in this day and age with a huge election in November. So Nancy's question obviously doesn't know who to support, because there are some rhinos, there are some trying to fight the good fight. We could list some of those senators maybe on one or two hands, and she's concerned about all these emails asking for donations. And and I also want to get your thoughts, John, about reaching across the aisle and compromising. Didn't Jesus say, if you're either for me or against me, you're either for us or against us? Anyway, go ahead, John. Answer Nancy's question.
So this is, by the way, this is sort of where I wanted to go with this next section.
Oh, good.
To talk about, because and Nancy's not a plant. This is not somebody pretending, my wife pretending to be somebody else who sent that in. It's not me either. Because look, let's be honest with it. This has been a very disappointing week. Politics is very disappointing. So we need to, our hope is in Jesus, not politics, not political parties, because those will ultimately disappoint. So let me give you like 2 or 3 examples of what's going on. So Johnson and the Republicans this week. Now I'm sure that Mike Johnson, and look, he says he's a Christian. I don't have any reason to doubt him. Okay. Mm-hmm. But politics is compromise, and people, it's very hard to be consistent all the way through on your politics and your worldview and everything. So I'm sure Mike Johnson is a supporter of Israel. And so I've seen people like Tony Perkins from Family Research Council, my friend Jack Kibbs, have come out and say Mike Johnson is a great guy because he got this budget thing through Congress that included an aid package for Israel. And we're all very happy about that, because Israel needs help, in part because prior administrations, the first 2 Obama administrations and now the 3rd Obama administration have really restricted Israel and what Israel's been able to do. And I don't like it. People in Israel don't like it. But we make them, you have to buy the weapons from us, but don't use them unless we give you permission, which is a horrible position for them to be in. When they're at war with a mortal enemy, they're under an existential threat. So Johnson put through the legislation, but the legislation carried a lot of baggage with it. It carried a lot of aid for Ukraine.
Yes.
And by the way, I was just talking to a friend a little while ago, and we can argue the merits of the Ukraine-Russia war and everything. It's possible that you don't like either side in this, and I just think that there's very syncretistic views when it comes to Vladimir Putin on the right. A lot of fanboys of Vladimir Putin on the right, even though listen, I have evangelical pastor friends in Ukraine. Russia shut down in the areas they've taken over. They've virtually shut down and imprisoned a lot of the evangelical pastors and people. It's just a fact, folks. Whether you like it or not, that's what's going on. And this aid included a lot of missiles were going to them. And my understanding is they're firing the missiles already. Wait a minute, they just passed the legislation a couple days ago.
Yeah.
What? I guess Amazon is delivering missiles now or something. I don't know. How did they get them there that quickly? But this could, Putin is upset, and this could lead to a thermonuclear war.
Yeah.
And so the world is very precarious. So Johnson let that go through because he was getting the Israel aid. And they also renewed the FISA nonsense. And by the way, which they're using to come after Christians. Let's just be honest with it.
Yeah.
They're prosecuting 80-some-year-old grandmothers for praying outside an abortion clinic, getting them convicted, bankrupting them on legal fees. They're facing 10 or 11 years in jail and, like $260,000 in fines. And the courts are imposing this on these people, and it's to destroy them. But the Black Lives Matter and other Antifa and all these leftist crazies, they don't prosecute. So we're in a real cultural war right now. And listen, they're going after Trump, whether you like Trump or not. The big picture thing on Trump is they're destroying the system. They are interfering with the election by prosecuting him. He cannot leave New York. He has to be in the courtroom every day. Wow. He's getting like 3 minutes a day, 4 days a week to talk to people. They're threatening with contempt. And I am telling you, I've been watching the oral arguments. I'm a lawyer, so give me a little bit of credit. I do know the law, and I've tried many, many cases. I am telling you that this is the most egregiously bad, stupid, moronic, without legal foundation case I have ever seen in my life. This thing in New York, because first they come in and say Trump interfered in the election in 2016 by paying somebody off in 2017. It doesn't make any sense. No. It's in the people that, like Mike Davis, who's watching this, and he says, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know where they're going. They don't even know where they're going. And they brought somebody in from the Biden Justice Department to try the case. It's terrible. And listen, whether you like Trump or not is totally irrelevant. The issue is, if they'll do it to him, they'll do it to you. Yes. And they are doing it to you in many ways. So we're very disappointed with the FISA thing.
Yes.
Because Congress is exempted from this.
Yes, you can continue talking about that, because I had Patrick Wood on the other day talking about that as well. But we have to remember, I just want to remind everybody, when you're looking at candidates, please pay more attention to the local and your state elections, because that's where we've really dropped the ball, where we can have influence, and it does affect us in our communities right close to home. But let's look at the federal level. Don't allow the media and the left to make you think about personalities. Trump and Biden, it should be policy, platform, and procedures. Look at what Trump did when he was in office. And I wasn't a huge Trump fan by any stretch. And I don't like his personality. I don't like some of his language. But I'll tell you what, his policies, when he got in office, I stand behind his pro-life stance, his pro-Israel. The economy was rocking. And anyway, that's enough of that. But policies, platforms, and procedures. John, quick question. Do you think the left, in part, is using this as a massive smokescreen because of everything else their other hand is doing behind the scenes, and the awful economy and the Biden administration, what they're getting away with, because they're using it as a distraction?
Look, yeah, absolutely, they're using it as a distraction, and they're doing a lot of things in the background, the way they're doing funding things, and they complain, like, well, Trump will do this, but listen. They've been laundering money through NGOs, and left-wing billionaires have been funding things and the way elections are operated in the United States, and the system is broken, in my opinion. So listen, as to Mike Johnson, as to Trump, their politicians are going to disappoint us. So people just have to make the decision. Can I, in my conscience, vote for them? I mean, we have the issue coming up right now of abortion.
Yep.
Got Roe versus Wade overturned because of the people that Trump appointed. So they get Roe versus Wade overturned, and then they find this statute in Arizona and say, hey, this statute bans all abortions in Arizona. And so what's everybody doing? Trump's doing it, Kerry Lake, other people, other politicos. Oh, we can't let this stand. We gotta soften this law, or we're going to lose the election. And that may very well be true. But then again, maybe God will bless you if you stand up for the right thing and allow this law to remain. But I was just seeing an article this morning about that. But here's where the syncretism thing works, David, because this will get us into the Israel thing. Because there was a recent interview that Tucker Carlson did of a guy named Munther Isaac, who is and I'll use scare quotes in the most meaningful way, scare quotes, a Lutheran pastor from Bethlehem.
Oh, right.
I will tell you that from a journalistic standpoint, and someone who has met Munther Isaac, who has been to a Christ at the Checkpoint conference, has been following what these people have been doing for years, Tucker's interview, he should be embarrassed with himself. It was that bad. It was pathetically awful, because he allowed this man who hates Jews, who hates Israel, and is himself get this, here comes that term again, a Marxist liberation theologian, to get on there unchallenged.
Oh my goodness.
And to spew lies about Israel. So in Bethlehem, when Israel was in charge of Bethlehem, the Christian population, and again, I'm going to use Christian in kind of a broad sense, because I don't think they're all true blue, really hardcore Christians, but among the Palestinians in Bethlehem, 85% Christian. Under the Oslo Accords, that area was turned over to the Palestinians. The Christian population of that area now, and I've been there, I have friends who live there, is somewhere between 3 and 7% Christian. When Hamas took over Gaza back in 2005, there were Christians there. Now there are hardly any there. The Christian population within Israel, among both Messianics and Arabs, among Arabs in the Israeli proper population, is growing. I mean, I have a survey sitting right up here on my shelf that somebody sent me recently done. Used to be 40 years ago, people thought there were 200 Jewish believers in Jesus in Israel. Now that number is around 30,000. So when Tucker gets on there with a straight face and says, oh, nobody wants to talk about how Israel is oppressing Christians, he's factually ignorant of the truth.
Wow.
And so when he says this, there is a bigger agenda there. And I know some people who are inside of Fox. And look, Tucker's views on Israel have been well known. He never talked about it. He's not this way. So there was a pastor. I don't know if I should name him. I referenced him in some interviews that I did. By the way, the article that you showed was an article at Tablet Magazine, tabletmag.org, by Dumasani Washington and another person. And I interviewed Dumasani.
Yeah, that was good.
Show last week, only 30 minutes too, which is a record for me. But Dumasani is a great believer, Israel supporter, and just a superb individual, and way more articulate than I. But I mentioned this in the interview with Dumasani, and also when I think I did something with Olivier Melnick on it, because I think this is a very big deal, and a lot of controversy about Candace Owens and stuff right now, where she is.
Yeah.
And so Caroline Glick, who I hope to interview in the next couple of weeks, pray that comes together. We're having trouble scheduling it, but she's agreed to it so far. But she said, look, I don't want to, she said this a few months ago, I don't want to say that Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens are anti-Semitic, but they sure seem to interview a lot of them and never challenge them on anything when they do. And so Munther Isaac is this way. Jesus was a Palestinian Jew. He was a Palestinian refugee. And so there's this image that Christ at the Checkpoint uses, the baby Jesus in the manger in Bethlehem, wrapped in a Palestinian khalifa. I'm not sure if I'm saying the right word. The scarf that they have, the black and white scarf. When the Pope went to Bethlehem in 2014, by the way, he went to Manger Square and he did a mass in front of the Church of the Nativity, the oldest church in Christendom in the world. And in the background was a mural of Mary in a burqa Joseph wearing the Palestinian headscarf, the baby Jesus in the manger, at the same thing that Mother Isaac is pushing in his interviews that he pushed at Christmas this year. Wow. Jesus, the Palestinian refugee and the rebel. And by the way, the three wise men at the Pope, the mural behind the Pope at the Mass in Bethlehem, were the last three popes, Pope Paul VI, John Paul II, and Benedict. Those were the three wise men. So this narrative, you see the narrative. So here's what this pastor said, because I think he has said in a couple sentences what I could easily take 5 or 6 pages to do. You've now reached the point where right-wing isolationists and nationalists have essentially the same anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic beliefs as left-wing neo-Marxists and Hamas supporters. Can you think of any other issue where the polarization between left and right has dissolved in such a way, and I will add, and dissolved as quickly as it has, to a more or less unified position? Let me put it another way. Would Tucker Carlson ever agree with people on the left in regards to abortion, LGBTQ, or the border? Of course not. Then why is he the archetype of a certain nationalist stream on the right, which we agree with on many issues? Yeah. Platforming a pro-Hamas, a pro-October 7th atrocities priest, and basically articulating the same anti-Zionist narrative as the pro-Hamas leftist protesters. And so what you need to do is you need to watch people like Tucker. You need to watch people like Candace Owens as we are having this meltdown of Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who was raised in an Islamic country in Somalia. She fled. Remember, she had to leave the Netherlands because her life was under threat. She was an atheist for a long time. She's now married to Niles Ferguson, and my understanding is she's become a believer in Jesus. So this is she's one of the most articulate, intelligent women on the planet. And she said these are not pro-Hamas protests; these are anti-Israel, anti-Jew protests that are taking place. And so watch whether these people on the right, who are our allies on certain issues, let's be honest about that, when will they criticize these protests at Columbia, Harvard, Yale, Penn, Ohio State University, and everywhere else, Berkeley? This is egregious what's happening. This is terrible, and Ayaan Hirsi Ali is exactly correct in what she says. And so look, this plays into Bible prophecy though, David, because in Zechariah 12 verse 2, it says, I'm going to make Jerusalem a cup that causes drunken reeling to all peoples. And we're seeing that happen because what are they calling this operation that Gaza did, and that Iran has picked up on, and Hezbollah has picked up on, is Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, because it's all centered around Jerusalem, and more specifically the Temple Mount. So we need to hold, so that it's kind of a long and roundabout way to answer this wonderful question that this lady asked. But I'm saying is you need to vote your conscience. I'm not going to get up and say, if you vote for Trump, you're not a Christian. I don't think that that's the point. And I'm not going to get up and say Mike Johnson isn't a Christian because he made a really stupid compromise on the FISA thing, which is going to harm Christians. Okay, I'm not willing to say that. I will say he's stupid for what he did, but I'm not going to say that he's not a Christian for it. I'm not going to add to the gospel in that way. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, but John, we've got
syncretism.
Yeah,
it's all tied together.
We've got several questions to get to, and we're not going to get to them all. But Donvan said, I had a pastor tell me I must vote for the lesser of two evils. After I told him, my state assemblyman votes for abortion. My pastor thinks I should vote for this guy in order to save the world. And he says, evil is evil. There are pastors out there that put more trust in sinners than they do in God. And so what are your thoughts on that real quick?
Yeah, look, as I said, politics is always going to involve compromise, and it's always going to involve disappointment. So the question is, you're going to have to hold your nose and vote in a lot of cases. And understand if you don't vote for the person, that the really bad person may get in. And that's, look, it shows that we live in a fallen world, and that's not going to change until the king returns.
Okay, here's another one, John. Why should we vote for a two-party system that wishes to destroy its own people? Why should we pay to live and pay to die?
Well, look, there is a point that comes, I think, where people have to say, "Am I going to stay here?" You know, that's
in America.
Yeah, I have friends who've left because they just say, we don't see any hope for this. We don't know where it's going. And again, that's an individual conscious decision that people are going to have to make. So I don't think there's a absolute right or wrong way. But look, I'm frustrated too. I don't like paying taxes for these horrible things. And listen, when you had Patrick Wood on this week, and I'm sure you talked about AI and technology and technocracy and all those things.
Yeah.
And I've been talking to Patrick about that for about 20 years. And at least it's close to 20 years since I met him. And listen, it's only gotten worse. In fact, I even think I saw a point last year where Patrick thought, well, we're kind of moving along this thing on the end times. And it's like, we're here now. We're here now.
Well, the days of Lot, right? We're here.
Yeah, it's moving so rapidly that it's really hard for people in what we would call the Watchman community to keep up, because it's, I could do a 2-hour update. I could do an 8-hour update very, very easily, because there's so much going on that's relevant.
All right, we have talked on this podcast, and as you probably have on many of your updates, about what's happening on the college campuses in America. That tends to be tedious, I think, for a lot of people. More believers, I think, are understanding how we got here, meaning the K through 12 indoctrination system, the social justice activism. They're making disciples of the left, and then they go to universities that are anti-Christian and anti-Semites, and they're pushing all these views that are all social justice, but they're not Christian, and so we're not surprised by what's happening. But John, I think we have to go back to Israel, and let's start with just a couple articles that one of them at the Jerusalem Post, that Israel's already at war in the north. Escalation with Lebanon is inevitable. What are your thoughts on that? Because that's an opinion piece at the J Post.
Yeah, that's by Avi Abelo, who I met near the menorah in the old city when I was there about a year and a half ago. He was walking by and I said, because he's a social media guy, but he's right. People that I follow, Seth Fransman, Jonathan Spire, the great people at Alma Research. I've done some interviews with them that are on our YouTube channel. The North is a very, very difficult problem. So when they went into Gaza, by the way, the early assessments were Israel was going to lose 15 to 20,000 soldiers in Gaza. They've lost about 300. So that's almost like a miracle that's all that they've lost. Now, the hostage situation still is bad down there. I heard there were only 20 hostages alive. Now, today I heard there might be more. They did release a video of one hostage showing that he's still alive, although he's lost a hand. And so his parents were there, and it's horrible. I mean, you can imagine what it's like to have your child under the control of these absolute evil, demonic lunatics called Hamas.
Yeah.
So they've done better, but when they went in, they thought there were 180 miles of tunnels. They find there are 500 or 600 miles of tunnels. They can't deal with it. I interviewed a guy who was in Gaza, and he said you clear an area and you go back 20 minutes later and 3 people pop up with RPGs and hand grenades throwing them at you. And so while Israel appears to control the surface, the underground thing is unbelievable. 500 or 600 miles. Understand that in the north, what Israel's facing is probably worse by a factor of 10. The tunnels are drilled through bedrock. They probably go all the way to Beirut. which is probably 30, 40 miles from the Israeli border.
Wow.
They have 50,000 regular fighters and probably another 50 to 100,000 in reserve that they can get their hands on pretty quickly. They have 10 to 20 times the number of rockets that Hamas had in Gaza. And many of these have precision guided and longer ranges. When I interviewed a guy from Alma named Avraham Levine, I said, well, what happens if the war breaks out in the north? And he said, no Israeli child will go to school in Israel for a year. So process that. In the north, in these border communities, and Pam and I we drove all the way along this border in 2017. It's kind of reminds you of California, the hills and the way the geography is. But you go to Kiryat Shimona, it's a town of little city of 25,000 people. It's empty. There are 80,000 people from the north that don't live where they used to live. There are 120,000 people from the Gaza, what they call the Gaza envelope, that don't live where they did. Now, some have started to return this week, by the way. But one lady, I saw an interview about a lady at a kibbutz, 30% of the people have come back. And those of us who've come back, we're traumatized. We won't go out and take a walk. We won't hang our laundry outside at certain times of the day because they're right on the other side of the border with 500 miles of tunnels. And they've been a lot killed, but there's still a lot there. But the tunnels in the north are embedded under bedrock. So you have 200,000 people internally displaced in Israel.
Wow.
And so when Iran shot a bunch of missiles, really kind of an unprecedented attack on April 13th, 14th, they shot 300 combination of drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles. 99% of those either failed to launch, maybe about 30% of those failed early on. The rest were shot down mostly by Israel, also by US, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. Also participated in shooting these downs when things went over. No drones entered official Israeli territory airspace. So it was almost, people in the IDF are saying that we were able to shoot everything down like this was a miracle. This was God's hand guiding us. And maybe this is true.
Yeah.
But that's 300. Hezbollah is estimated to have the capability to be able to launch 5,000 a day for an extended period of time. There are estimates. I saw a lady interviewed recently. She's a former IDF analyst. She said that what happens if there's a war in the north, Israel could lose 200 to 500 civilians every day for months.
Wow.
So we need to factor this in. So this raises the issue of the Samson option and how they're going to go about this. When I look at a purely secular analysis, okay, not factoring in God or that this is where God wants these people to be, and he's calling them back from the nations, just as he prophesied in passages like Ezekiel 36. I'll bring them back in unbelief, and then I will give you a new heart, and then you will know that I am the Lord. So we're in the midst of this process of what's happening. So with the protests in New York and Boston and all across college campuses across the country, at Northwestern University today, and they're not arresting people. They're calling off the police.
Just like 2020, right?
Yeah, it's this all over again. They're not going to be prosecuted. Columbia University is shut down. If you were a parent if you're Jewish and a parent of a college student, why would you send your kid to Harvard or Columbus?
Oh my goodness, I know.
By the way, Mike, the guy that does Dirty Jobs, the TV show Dirty Jobs, Mike, whatever his name is, he said he has his foundation supports trade schools. I saw an article he wrote today. I'm proud to tell you that no trade schools are having anti-Israel protests as we speak. because people are practical there. They're not infused with this Marxist radical ideology, and it's upending the United States. Look, I'm not particularly optimistic. Okay, I'm looking at what's going on with the election. I'm looking at the crisis on the border, David. It's totally out of control. And there was another survey released today, and it said that Muslims that come in are conservative in the generation that comes in. The next generation is like 90% likely to vote Democratic because they'll be indoctrinated in our education system. So, as Patrick will say, they've been at this for over 100 years.
Yeah.
And now we think, okay, well, we're going to fight back and we're going to elect the right guy and everything's going to change. No. This is where the work gets really, really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And so you got to protect your family. You got to protect your kids from this ideology. You got to, train up a child and that sort of thing. One of the things Ken Ham years ago, who said that we used to think, what was the title of the book that he had? Already Gone.
Yes.
So we used to think that when the kids got to college, they turned away from the faith. And I'm telling you, based on what we've been able to find, when they go to college, they're already gone.
Yeah. Well,
they happen while they were living in your house and going to your church. That's when you lost them.
Well, there's research now that says kids that were growing up in a Christian, and you might have to put that in air quotes now, in a Christian home, start doubting their faith in middle school. So they start doubting in middle school. They're gone even by high school. So when they get to the university system, it's no wonder that the left has done such a good job, and I mean good in a bad way, if that makes sense. It's the marketing of evil and indoctrinating these kids, that what we're seeing on the college campuses is an indirect result, John, I think, of the lack of biblical worldview, and even in the church. So we're kind of reaping some of our own, of what we've sown in the fruit of our church, our weak churches. Where do you want to go? Actually, we've got.
Well, can we go back to Israel for a minute, because there's
sure.
a lot of sort of interrelated issues there. So I stand. Look, I'm conservative, and my view is that the left will always accuse you of being of you doing what they are actually doing.
Yeah.
So, for example, we get accused of election interference, for example. So, what was the interview I saw just yesterday? Nancy Pelosi calls for the ouster of Benjamin Netanyahu, the democratically elected leader of Israel. Now, listen, you may not like Netanyahu. That's okay. You can be my friend, and you can absolutely detest Netanyahu, and I have friends who do. But he was elected in a free, fair election.
Yes.
There were some problems that he saw, and his coalition, which is 65 of the 120 Knesset members, which is a pretty big majority in the recent history of Israel in the Knesset, they wanted to enact some judicial reforms. There's been a meltdown by the left. The left is losing the demographic game in Israel. The Orthodox families have 6, 7, 8 children. The secular people do not. In the United States, we have the same problem. This is so weird. I don't know what it means in Bible prophecy yet. Just that I'm sure that it's pretty significant. And I think I talked about it at a conference 5 years ago for the first time. Collapsing demographics all over the world. Birth rates are falling. Birth rates in the United States fall. In Japan, they sell more adult diapers than baby diapers. The country is losing 1 to 2 to 3 million people in population every year now. Do you understand that? China is collapsing. Estimates by some analysts, because of their one-child policy and unrestricted abortion, they will drop maybe by half in 30 years. Their population will go down by half. Now, they'll still have 700 million people, but understand there's 700 million people that are gone. Europe, the birth rates are collapsing. Italy and Spain cannot be recovered. They'll be gone. And this is happening in Russia, all over the place. And I don't know what it means. It's somehow this world, if the Lord tarries, is going to be flipped upside down.
Mm.
So, but the right, the conservative, orthodox, religious right in Israel is growing in population, thereby growing in demographics, growing in power. And in other countries, it's collapsing. Sex selection in China, sex selection abortion in India, where males are favored. David, do you know that we're close to a time in our world where between China and India, there will be 200 million military-age males that have no prospect of a wife?
Wow.
What does that do to the world culture, war, rumors of wars, and all the things we read about in the end times? I'm not, and by the way, the fastest fertility collapse in female fertility in human history, I read about in a paper published by the Iranian regime called the Tehran Times about 8 or 10 months ago, that Iran had the fastest decline in female fertility of any country in human history. Now, put this into, we know that Persia, the Prince of Persia and that type of thing is going to be a significant thing in the end times, that there's this demonic power behind Persia. We read about that in Daniel chapter 10. Mm-hmm. That demonic power hasn't gotten anywhere. And in the 2,500 years since Daniel wrote that, that demonic power has only gotten smarter, more conniving, more crafty. But does that, and I'm sure that demonic power knows the declining demographics. And so it's like, okay, this is the shot that I have where Persia will come against Israel in the last days. I'm just saying that I think it plays together, and I'm probably sure you're not going to find another person that really agrees with me, and that's okay. But I love to argue with people. I used to I never told my clients, but because people paid me to argue on their behalf, but sometimes I think I would have actually done it for free on a few occasions. But we live in this world where this stuff is hurtling towards a certain conclusion. Now, we don't know exactly how, when. We have parameters that the prophetic scriptures give us. I think we make a mistake if we're too dogmatic that it's got to work out this particular way, because sometimes a prophecy will only know after the fact. Oh, so that's how that's going to work out. And the proof of how a Bible prophecy is going to be fulfilled is when it's actually fulfilled. But we live at this time where these things are really coming together very, very quickly. So all these articles that I sent you from the Jerusalem Post and things about the multi-front war that Israel is facing, the world is turning, the near neighbors of Israel are turning against Israel. They have the Gaza front, they have the Hezbollah Lebanon front, they have the areas that's known as the West Bank internally front. They also have internally within the Arab communities within Israel proper that are a problem. And then they have Jordan, Egypt, and all these other countries. And they have, like, the world opinion is turning against them. And so it's in that context, David, that when I see a guy who I like, Tucker Carlson or Candace Owen, caving on this issue of Israel, that's very bothersome to me, because it goes back to what we talked about the first. It's a syncretistic worldview, and it's not biblical. It's wrong, and we have to call it out when we see it.
Yes, and we've run out of time. It went by fast again, John. We could have done 2 hours. So this conversation will be continued. We just don't know when, but you do your prophecy updates. Are you doing a couple a week now, and also with other guests?
I do ones on Sunday at Fellowship Bible Chapel. Once a month, I preach the sermon. Last Sunday, I preached on the epicenter. I got to choose, so I did Ezekiel 34, 35 through 38, 39. I do an update each week. I do try to do I do interviews with other people like you. And then I also have been trying to do
roundtables, right?
Roundtables once or twice a week with like 4 or 5 people for a couple hours, at least every other week. So I sort of took this week off, but I do appreciate people following and listening.
And by the way, guys, I forget this is live. This is not pre-recorded, so I can mention I'll be speaking at the Calvary Chapel Prophecy Conference. It's the Great Lakes Prophecy Conference tomorrow, 3 p.m.
Calvary Chapel, Appleton.
Calvary Chapel, Appleton, Wisconsin. It's ccappleton.org. It will be live streamed. I'm just going to run down Chris Quintana, Ed Yerek, Gary Kaw, Jeff Solwald, Mary Danielson, Rob Yardley, T.A. McMahon, and Tommy Ice will be speaking both tomorrow night and Saturday night. But we hope to see you if you're in Northeast Wisconsin at the Prophecy Conference there. John Haller, God bless you, brother. We'll do this again.
Thank you,
maybe not live, but we'll do this again.
Best to you. Thanks.
All right. Thanks so much for your time. Man, there's so much we didn't get to, but that's okay. We don't want to overwhelm you. We do want to encourage you, friends, to keep trusting no matter what. God's got this. He's in control. These things, we're living in days that some of us had a feeling were coming, but we just didn't expect them this soon. Anyway, we'll see you next time. God bless you. And as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter.